We're back, joined by Roger Noriega, our duty expert on matters involving our hemisphere. He comes to that position by virtue of his service to our country and senior positions, both at the State Department, where he was an Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs, the Organization of American States, where he was the U.S. Permanent Representative, and the National Security Council. He's a man with whom we visit regularly. He's today a visiting fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and a great resource through a marvelous online internet service called interamericansecurity.watch.org. Roger Noriega, welcome back. It's good to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Frank.
Let me ask you about something I was discussing with Bill Gertz earlier in the program, Roger. I know you have been very seized with the threat posed by organized crime in Latin America. One of the things he mentioned was what seems to be a sign of increasing assertiveness, aggressiveness, really, of one element of that phenomenon, the Los Zetas gang in Mexico, having shot down, apparently, a U.S. Border Patrol helicopter. Is this just a symptom of a much larger problem, and what should we be doing about it?
Well, absolutely. I think Mexican cartels are just part of a chain of criminal organizations operating with virtual impunity up and down the continent, one that's ignored by the Obama administration rather irresponsibly. You have a narco state that's emerged in Venezuela, and you have U.S. diplomats very busily coddling that regime, courting that regime, notwithstanding the fact that there are open U.S. investigations of principles of that government in Venezuela. State Department officials meeting with them. It sends a signal that we really don't give a damn about the fact that Venezuela is a cornerstone of an organized crime network that is menacing Central America, Mexico, and shoveling cocaine into the United States, conspiring, in the case of El Salvador, with gangs that operate with impunity, very dangerously in every principal American city. So it's metastasized on Obama's watch, and he's not using the tools that are readily available to him to confront this organized crime network that threatens the way of life of the American people and our neighbors in the region.
Roger, looking at your interamericansecurity.watch.org site, you have a paper that you call Key Points for the American Enterprise Institute about Latin America, and you make note of something that General Martin Dempsey, the outgoing chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said over, a year and 4 or 5 months ago, I guess now, March 2014, quote, "Transnational organized crime from our southern hemisphere," unquote, ranked with Russia, China, and Al-Qaeda among the principal national security threats confronting the United States. And yet, as you've indicated, this certainly does not seem to be getting that kind of attention from the Obama administration. What are the implications of the disconnect, notably to the extent that we are seeing these kinds of international organized crime elements making common cause with, or even being perhaps enabled by, international bad actors like Iran, for example?
Well, absolutely. That's a principal problem, is that the terrorist organizations have allied like never before with narco traffickers and people who move their illicit cargo into the United States with virtual impunity, launder the benefits of those activities using our own financial system. So the narcos and the terrorists are using our own financial system to attack us, to undermine the security of our hemisphere. It wrecks those countries and their institutions, but it causes instability that has an implication on the security of the United States. So right here on our border, right here in our hemisphere, it's a problem that's being ignored by President Obama. He has an elaborate strategy that his administration put forward to confront organized crime, but as a practical matter, U.S. diplomats are not doing enough to confront the problem, which is essentially based in Venezuela and the narco state there, but that poses a threat throughout the region.
Roger, let me ask you, we spend a lot of time on the program these days focusing on Iran and this nuclear deal, one of the facets of which, as you know, is an enormous economic windfall for them. By some estimates, it's as low as $50 or $60 billion. I think more realistically, it's probably well north of that, maybe as high as some have indicated, $700 or $800 billion. that will be available as a result of both the, sanctions being lifted and oil and gas sales and investments and the like. From your perspective as one of the country's preeminent authorities on our hemisphere and our security interests there, what would you expect to see Iran doing if they have essentially limitless resources to further destabilize the region, whether it's in cahoots with the Venezuelans or other nations of the region, or these international organized criminal elements, or for that matter, their proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah that are now operating at our border, if not across it?
Well, this is very, very serious because at this point, the Iranians have been trying to get a hold of a nuclear bomb for decades, and they're going to continue unrelentingly to try to do that. Probably have been emboldened by the agreement that the Obama administration has cooked up. But what the Iranians have today, and have had for decades also already, is the ability to project terrorism into our hemisphere and eventually into our territory. Lord knows they've plotted to do that, plotted an attack even in the capital in Argentina in 1992, 1994, two horrific bombings, killing 150 people, injuring hundreds more. And the Iranians are actively in cahoots with the Argentine government covering up those terrorist attacks. There are people implicated in those attacks. Moshe Rabbani, for example, a cultural attaché in the embassy in Buenos Aires, still active, still recruiting, still operating in the Western Hemisphere. And if they have the resources at their disposal, that they'll be able to be even more brazen and dangerous.
I was struck by something else that is on your website, interamericansecurity.org. The Argentines are making something of a they're making something of a show of their interest in apprehending an Iranian former defense minister by the name of Ahmed Vahidi in connection with the bombing in Argentina of a Jewish center many years ago now. Roger, just read us in on what's going on here. It seemed that the government, of which the foreign minister is a part, has gone to some lengths to obscure, obstruct, and otherwise impede that investigation. What's going on with this letter?
Well, it's a farce, quite frankly, scandalous farce. The Argentine government of Cristina Kirchner and her foreign minister Hector Timmerman have cooked up a plot with the Iranians to obscure the Iranian involvement in the attacks that I mentioned in 1992 and 1994. Even the prosecutor who was investigating this, and who was about ready to implicate the president in a conspiracy to cover up those terrorist acts, was murdered in Buenos Aires a couple of months ago. 6 months ago. It was a scandal, and there is going to be no justice there. I think, frankly, the United States needs to get serious about holding the authors of those attacks accountable. Obviously, the Argentines are not going to do it. We need to release all the intelligence that we have at our disposal and expose what happened there, because it paints a picture about what the Iranians and Hezbollah are capable of doing if countries in this hemisphere do not defend their own justice, their own people, their own institutions.
To say nothing of our interests. Roger Noriega, we have to leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time, as always, and the great service you've rendered to our country, both in the senior ranks of our State Department at the OAS and what you're rendering now at the American Enterprise Institute. Keep it up. Come back to us again soon if you would. I hope the rest of you will come back to us again on Monday. Same time, same station. Until then, this is Frank Gaffney. Thanks for listening.